Good evening. And welcome to Judaism Decoded, lesson number 6, the truth of Sinai. This is one of my favorite lessons, and this is really going to be the last and final lesson, the concluding lesson of Judaism Decoded, this beautiful course through which we've been dissecting the passage of the oral tradition, what exactly it means when we say that this is tradition, that this is Masorah, that this is something that was passed down to us, what exactly that means. And we've done a lot. We've done a lot so far. We've done a lot. We've explored that there's 4 different categories to the oral Torah. We've explored, when do things change and how do things change, right? We've explored what does it mean when there's a machlokas, when there's a disagreement in the Talmud. How can that be true? Where does that come from? Isn't there only one truth? We've gotten a lot of answers to a lot of the classic questions a lot of people ask. I count myself lucky to be able to teach this class because I've learned a lot, even though I knew many of these texts, from beforehand. But seeing it presented beautifully is always a massive benefit. And of course, teaching always really explains these points very, very well, really helps to drive them home. But from day one, in other words, for the past 5 weeks, I have asked all of you to suspend certain questions. They are as follows. On day one, we assumed that everybody in our class believes in God and believes in the fact that the Torah came from Sinai, okay? Believes that there was a godly revelation, that Hashem spoke to the Jewish people and he gave them the Torah. And we mentioned at the time that we're going to talk about this in lesson 6. But for the time being, we have been leaving that question aside and we've been saying, let's talk about the Torah, assuming that it is from God. How should we treat it? Should we be able to change it? Should we not be able to change it? Should there be able to be arguments? All the different questions that we've discussed. And today we're going to talk about rationale or logical proof to the giving of the Torah at Sinai, to the godly revelation at Sinai, as the lesson's title is, the truth of Sinai. But before we even discuss if there is a rational basis for belief in Sinai, what I'd like to try to understand here is, before we even figure out whether there is or isn't rationale, whether there is or isn't logical proof of some sort to the fact that Hashem gave us the Torah at Sinai, before we get into that, let me ask you this question. How important is that for you? Okay? So, in other words, learning exercise number 1 asks, do you find it important, we're on page 188 in our textbooks, do you find it important to logically prove and establish that God revealed himself to our ancestors at Sinai? And what is your reason? Okay? So, and by the way, there's no right or wrong answer here. We're just trying to get a feel for where people are at here. Lisa, what do you say? Do you think this is an important point?
Yes, actually I do.
Why? What is your reason?
Because it gives us the basis and the rules, the basis for the rules and regulations as to what we are to believe.
Okay.
And not believe.
All right. Anybody say no? Anybody say it's not so important to have a rational basis for like a rational, logical proof for the fact that Hashem revealed himself to us at Sinai? Does anybody believe that that's not necessarily necessary? Speak up now or forever hold your peace. What about a little thing we call belief? Faith.
How about yes and no?
Yes and no. Okay, explain the no part. Why is it not so important?
Because the laws that are there from Sinai are very rational. And some of those laws were even in effect in other cultures. Not all of them, obviously. But they were rationally, human beings had put them together. Different cultures had put them together. So it's not necessarily something that I need to feel as if God, boom, suddenly just dropped on their culture. However,
I strongly disagree with you, but for the purposes of today's conversation, that's fine. I can disagree. I believe that the reason I don't murder has nothing to do with the fact that the Romans or the Greeks ever came up with such an idea. It has to do with the fact that God told me not to murder, and that's the reason I don't murder. And we could talk a different time about why that's necessary. But for now, let me ask you a different question. You certainly would not say that's the case with regards to the laws of Shabbos or kosher, correct?
That's why I say not all of them. Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying with regards to those, you think it's necessary that there should be rational,
Correct.
logical proof to the fact that Hashem gave the Torah at Sinai.
Correct.
Let me ask you guys a different question. Nobody here is of the opinion that even if I don't have logical proof, I still just believe it. I believe in Hashem. I know it in my heart. I believe it. And it's not necessarily, I'm not, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer here. That's good. It means we have a whole bunch of academics here. A whole bunch of philosophers. They want to hear proof. They don't want to believe it.
You know, I discovered my Judaism when I was 11 years old.
Okay.
I was not in an academic type of mood. I just knew.
So to you, if you didn't have logical proof that Hashem gave us the Torah at Sinai, in other words, let's say you one day have a conversation with a very, very good philosopher or somebody who's really skilled at whatever,
Yeah.
and he disproves it for you, would that change your belief?
I don't know that he could. I don't know that my fundamental belief could be disproved. You could rationally put together an argument against Hashem, but
You're saying,
yeah,
well, you have a certain belief.
yes,
So back to my question, how necessary is it, in learning exercise number 1, we have a scale from A to D. Is it very important, somewhat important, relatively unimportant, or completely unimportant for you to have a rational basis in believing in Hashem?
for me, yes, I have to.
It's important to have a rational
Oh,
basis.
no, rational. No, not rational.
Oh, it's not important.
Yeah.
Malka, you're shaking your head. For you, it's not important?
No, it's not important because you
Okay, and
can't.
guys, like I said,
You can't see them. There's nothing to see. You have to believe.
You're saying
it.
you're never going to get proof. You're saying you're never
I
going to
will
get
never
proof.
get. No,
Right.
I will never get proof.
Okay. Would proof, to Malka and Arnold, and really anybody else that's in this kind of camp, would proof help you? You think proof would help you believe in Hashem? In other words, you're saying your belief in Hashem is supra-rational. It's not about my logic. It's something that supersedes my logic. It's in my neshama. That's it. Would proof help you believe in Hashem, or it's completely unimportant?
of course.
You're completely uninterested.
Not for me.
Please. You say, of course?
Well, I mean, wouldn't it, if you had some direct contact, it wouldn't hurt.
Right. It would help you. Okay. So
It
for
would
the most
only-
part,
it would only
most
be a greater
Jews-
foundation. That's all.
So for the most part, most Jews fall into 4 categories. Okay, we have a non-believer, all right, an atheist. This person absolutely needs rational proof. But to be quite honest, because they don't believe in Hashem, even if you brought rational proof, usually this probably wouldn't help at all. Category number 2 is you have the I'm not ready category. All right, these are people. They say. So just to clarify, in today's lesson, we're not going to address the non-believer. We're not talking now to somebody who doesn't believe in Hashem and doesn't want to believe in Hashem and is coming with an argument. We're talking to somebody who is somewhere above that on the spectrum, all right? So we have 3 other categories. Category number 2 is the I'm not ready category. What does that mean? So this is a person who says, look, I think I would like to have a rational basis in Hashem, and I believe in Hashem. Here's my problem. If you actually prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that Hashem exists, then all of a sudden I become hypocritical because I'm not keeping every single one of his laws and every single thing that he does. So, and I don't want to live in this cognitive dissonance kind of realm where, I believe it, I've been proven 100% accurately that Hashem exists, but yet he's telling me to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm not doing it. So I'm there, but I'm not ready yet. Okay, number 3 is going to be a major believer. Okay, it'll be somebody who believes in Hashem with a passion and emunah. His relationship with Hashem is entirely faith-based. Okay, like the thumbs up girl, you see that?
Right.
And somebody like that actually might not be interested in rationale to their Judaism. And number 4 is an interesting category. Okay, number 4 is a category that we're going to call the beauty seeker. It's an interesting name. The beauty seeker is somebody, they appreciate Judaism for its meaningfulness and for its beauty. They're beauty seekers. They're not truth seekers. I don't need Judaism to be true. I'm looking for beauty. Okay? I'm looking for meaning.
It fits together. It fits
for
together.
meaning in my life. Oh,
Yeah.
it happens to fit together right now because I do believe that Judaism is true. But it has nothing to do with the fact that Judaism is true or not true.
Yeah.
I'm looking for beauty and meaning in my life, and Judaism provides that to me. So I don't really need rational basis to Hashem, whatever. Like, let the academics be busy with being academics.
Yeah.
And let them be busy philosophizing about whether Hashem did or did not reveal himself to us at Sinai. But for me, I'm fine. I put on tefillin. It gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling in my heart. I light Shabbos candles, and I believe that I'm bringing spirituality into the world. It's beauty, it's meaning, it brings meaning to my life. I don't want to just be running around doing nothing. Okay? So, really, tonight's lesson is going to be geared at the last three. If you find yourself either in the category of I'm not ready, in other words, I'm a little scared to be given 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt proof that Hashem exists and that Hashem revealed himself to us at Sinai and gave us the Torah, because then I have to keep the entire Torah. To somebody like that, the message is, stop being so scared. The Torah itself tells us that Judaism is a step-by-step process. You don't have any disconnect. You're not a hypocrite because you believe that Hashem exists, you believe that Hashem gave us the Torah, but you're not keeping the entire Torah. Hashem gave us the Torah in order that should be our journey, in order that we should try to keep as much of it as possible, and every single day we should grow in that. Okay? Even to the major believer, they have something to gain from the discussion that we're going to have now. Why? Because it's very nice that a person has belief, but belief only takes you so far. Belief means that I'm serving Hashem with my heart and with wherever our belief is. But belief is always something, what do we say? We say suspend your intellect, right? And start believing. That means that I'm only serving Hashem with my belief system. We have to serve Hashem not just with belief, but also with our minds. You're letting go of a whole relationship that you can have with Hashem just because you're saying, I'm a major believer. I believe in Hashem, and that's enough, and that's the way I connect to Hashem. What do you mean? You think Hashem doesn't want you to connect him with your mind? Hashem gave you a mind for that specific reason. And to the beauty seeker, perhaps this is most important of all, to somebody who just looks for beauty and meaning, it's like, I don't need to know that Judaism is true. The answer is no. That's 100% not true. That's 100% wrong. Why? Because if Judaism to you is only about being beautiful and meaningful and beautiful rituals and nice community and all of those things, and that is, by the way, those are all big parts of Judaism. But then what's going to happen is one day you may find another religion or another part of your life.
Correct.
Another calling, another something else.
Right.
Some people find this, by the way, in medicine, in medical practice. They feel that gives them meaning in their life. By the way, some people find this in parenthood. You know that? Parenthood gives me meaning and beauty in my life. Others find it, like we mentioned, in other religions or in other causes or whatever it is, right? So it's important for us to recognize that together with all these things, none of these things are bad. But together with all these things, our religion has to be founded also. We have to learn how to also understand it with our minds. And that's going to be the goal of today's lesson. The goal of today's lesson is going to be to try to understand and rationalize and bring proof, logical proof, to the fact that Hashem revealed himself to us at Sinai, gave us the Torah, and it's not some kind of made-up book that was made up by Moses or Solomon or David or even somebody by the name of Fred. We're going to talk a lot about Fred. We'll get to him soon. The vast majority of this course, in general, till today, has been built, for the most part, on the Rambam, right? Maimonides. We've discussed this many times. We've quoted him a lot from his introduction to the Mishnah and from other places. Today, we're going to dive into a different one of his works, right? So Maimonides, I think I've asked you guys this question before. Who was Maimonides? Anybody know?
A scholar, a Spanish scholar.
He was a scholar. He was Spanish. Thank you. What else? What else was he?
700.
What was
A
he?
physician.
Very good, Elise. He was a physician. Catherine, what did you mention? He lived in the 1100s.
Physician and
he was also a philosopher.
Yeah,
Right? Some of you might be familiar with some of his works, like he wrote, for instance, The Guide to the Perplexed. Right? Another book that he wrote, or I should say a letter, but it's a very, very long letter, so it's been published as a book, and it's one of his most philosophical works, is a book. This is all an introduction to text number 1 on page 188. It's a book that's called the Epistle to Yemen, or the letter to the Yemenites. So the Yemenite Jews during the Rambam's time, the Rambam was not living in Yemen. The Rambam was living, I think when they sent him his letter, let me see if they tell us here, one second.
Was he already in Egypt?
I don't know if he was in Egypt or if he was in Israel already. I'm sorry, I don't think he made it to Israel when he was alive. He made it to, he's buried in Safat. I don't know if he was already living in Egypt, if he was in Morocco, or if he was on the run. Whatever it is, the Jews of Yemen had a big problem. All right, you're going to hear soon that there was a lot of things at the same time. Right, they had a three-pronged problem. Okay, problem number one was that there was a fanatical Muslim clerk who became the ruler of the land, and he decreed that his Jewish subjects convert to Islam under the threat of harsh punishment and suffering. Okay, so that's already no good news for the Jews, right? Whenever there's some sort of ruler, some sort of emperor, some sort of shah, some sort of whatever he's called, the caliphate, that decides that the Jews need to convert to whatever religion it is, right? At times it was Christianity, in this instance it's Islam. So that was number one. So the Jews were already being oppressed. Their agony was compounded by a Jewish apostate who embraced Islam, and in order to demonstrate his zeal, he went around preaching to the Jewish communities that Muhammad was a divinely sent prophet, alluded to in the Bible, and that Islam was the new Judaism, and that we have to accept it, etc. Number three came around, was that just at that time, just to their luck, the Jewish people, the Jews of Yemen at that time suffered a false Messiah. In other words, there was a Jew who proclaimed himself the Messiah. Many Jews followed in his ways. And then when it turned out that he was a false Messiah, so some Jews still followed him, other Jews didn't. And this added to the whole balagan, like they say in Hebrew. Yeah. So the Jews were struggling greatly. So in the face of these challenges, a local sage, a local chacham, turned to the Rambam, to Maimonides, for advice and counsel. And Maimonides penned his famous epistle to Yemen. And this is going to be the foundation of today's lesson, but we'll build a lot on it. Malka, why don't you get us started with text one?
Remember, my co-religionists, that this great, incomparable, unique historical event is attested by the best of evidence. For never before or since has a whole nation witnessed a revelation from God or beheld his splendor.
Whoa, that's a bold statement to make.
Sinai.
He says, remember, and he's talking about the revelation at Sinai, right? He says, it's attested to by the best of evidence.
Yeah. Interesting.
Evidence? I mean, remember, I haven't mentioned this yet. For the duration of today's lesson, okay, we're gonna remove the Torah for a moment, okay? We're going to remove the Bible. The Bible doesn't count as proof. In fact, that would be considered circular logic, right? To say that, it says in the Torah that the Torah was given at Sinai, so therefore it must be true that the Torah was given at Sinai, right? In fact, for the purposes of today's lesson, let's assume the Torah is not true, okay? Let's assume that the Torah made up this story. And we're trying to figure out if there's any other proof to it other than the Torah, okay? So, but the Rambam is claiming that is the case. That there's evidence to the fact that Hashem revealed himself to us at Sinai, and that he revealed himself to an entire nation, and he gave them the Torah. What is this evidence that he's talking about? This is a question we can ask to the Rambam. This is also a question, by the way, that we can ask any one of us to our great-grandparents. Because I don't know if it was your father or your grandfather, obviously with the exclusion of converts, right? I don't know if it was your father or your grandfather or your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. At some point, one of your great-great-grandparents believed in the revelation at Sinai, even if right now, for the purposes of today's conversation, none of us do, right? Mm-hmm. So at some point they did, and they believed it so firmly that that's why they held on to their Judaism. So we could pose this question to them too. What's your evidence? What's your proof? Right?
Right.
Now let me take this a step further. All right, so far we're just saying that they presumably believed in Sinai. If we go back far enough in history, I don't care who it is on this Zoom. I don't care if you're Ashkenazi, you're Sephardi, your parents suffered at the hands of the Crusaders, or your parents, right? If your ancestors suffered at the hands of the Crusaders, or your ancestors suffered at the hands of the jihadists, or your ancestors suffered at the hands of the pogroms, right? Or at the hands of the Tsar in Russia, or under Stalin. I don't care who it is, right? But then we can go back to the Spanish Inquisition, right? The Holocaust, whoever it was, we all have ancestors in our lineage that gave up their lives for Judaism. In fact, many of them had the choice to convert to Christianity, to Islam, depending on what era in Jewish history we're talking about, and they chose not to. So imagine you were standing next to them, right? You say, hey, Bubby, can I just ask you a quick question? Why are you so sold on this Judaism thing that you're willing literally to give up your life for it? It's something you believe. All right, so you trade it in for something else, right? Very often people are trading things in, right? We all hold certain beliefs or certain whatever, or whatever. We have certain things in our house, and we trade them in because we get more money, right? If I asked any one of you right now if you like your house and you'd like to live in your house, you'd all say 100% yes. There's nothing you can do to convince me out of it, right? If I offered you $50,000, you'd probably say no, thank you. If I offered you $500,000, depending on how much your house is worth, depending on whatever, you might say yes, you might say no. If I offered you $3 million, all of a sudden that firm belief that you had at the beginning that this house I'm not selling it, I'm not moving, right? Why? Because you traded it in for something more valuable. So if this Judaism is not serving you well, especially if you're a beauty seeker, right? Especially if you're somebody who's just finding meaning in Judaism, and you turn to your Bubby and you say, Bubby, what is your proof for this? And she says, I don't have any proof. I feel it in my heart. You feel it in your heart? No problem. Do you want a heart? They're about to kill you for this, right? So what are you giving up your life for? Why would you do this?
Yeah.
Now, the truth is there is a spiritual answer to this. There is something called the neshama, and that drives us to be connected to Hashem no matter what. But today we're talking logically. You have a logical conversation with her. What do you think she would say? Or he?
My parents.
All through. Come again?
Well, she might say that's what all my ancestors believed or something like that. Maybe
Elise, you realize we're talking about dying here, right?
I'm dying. Oh, okay, never mind.
So I don't know that it's enough to say blind faith is what made them stick so steadfast to this.
Yeah. Christians can say the same thing. Muslims can say the same. The Hindus, everybody can say the same thing.
What, blind faith?
Yeah, my parents, my grandparents, my great.
I don't need a. I look. I throughout this lesson today, I'm going to do this a couple times. There's only so much I can talk about. I'm not going to beat up on the Christians or the Muslims, but we're going to talk about Judaism. We're going to talk about the truth of Judaism. That's what we're going to do. We're going to try to stay focused on that positive without saying that therefore other things are wrong. It's fine. Christians are all great people, and Muslims are great people. They're all logically and academic people. They're thinking people. All right. So therefore, we're going to dive into evidence, and we're going to try to figure out what can ever be considered rational evidence or proof to the fact that Judaism is true. But before we do that, by the way, we gotta obviously establish the standards of evidence. Okay. Let's ask some people here that have been awfully quiet. David.
Yes.
In general, things that you believe in your life, okay? How much evidence do you require before you believe something?
How much what?
How much evidence? You got 4 options up here on the table. They're also in your textbook on page 189, learning exercise number 2. How much evidence do you require in order to believe something? Any measure of evidence is enough?
No.
Okay. Do you need it to be beyond a shadow of a doubt? Where are you on this spectrum?
Yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Every single fact that you know in your life, you know beyond a shadow of a doubt?
Well, as much as I can understand.
All right, we're going to get yourself in trouble here. David, you're sitting in a house. Let me ask you a question. You own the house? You rent the house? Yes?
Oh, what? Yes.
Yeah. How long are you living in the house?
20 years.
20 years. I'm looking at you. I don't see you wearing a hard hat. How do you know the building isn't about to cave in? You know that beyond the shadow of a doubt? Can you prove that to me? You know the engineer?
Basically.
You know the engineer?
No, but being in construction.
You have at one point seen the beams of your house?
I have.
How recently?
Probably 6 years ago.
6 years ago. You know how many things? Tell me, as somebody who's in construction, what can happen over 6 years? Many things.
Well, yes, things can rot.
I guess my point is, it's not beyond the shadow of a doubt for you that the building is not going to come down. I don't know that there's any fact in our lives that we know that's beyond the shadow of a doubt, right? Colors is a big one that we always point to, right? Nobody ever knows that this is like we all see this. Everybody will say this can is green, right? But you don't know that me and you are seeing this the same way. There's no way you can know the beyond the shadow of a doubt. At the very least, I'm going to knock you down to beyond a reasonable doubt. Most things that you know, you're like, look, I'm pretty sure the house is not going to cave in. It hasn't caved in for 20 years. I know that the beams are pretty stable. I'm also in construction. You're good. You got a bonus, right? You already got a bonus on Malka, who's sitting outside. She has no clue if there's going to be an earthquake or not. And look at her. She's sitting so calmly, right? So clearly, in life, we don't always require things to be beyond a shadow of a doubt. Not sure that's a fair standard to hold Judaism up to, right? But what's about, like, let's say just any evidence? Okay, let's say I don't know, let's say I show you a picture, David, of me and President Trump standing together, arm in arm. Would you believe that I took a picture with President Trump?
Well, it could be, but it could be doctored.
Oh, okay. Where do you
I
think
would
we're
hope
at?
not.
Where do you think? Let's keep politics out of this. Where do you think that stands? If I have a picture with I don't know, the Queen of England, where do you think that stands? Is that any measure of evidence? Is that more likely true than false? Is that beyond the reasonable doubt? Is that beyond the shadow? It's certainly not beyond the shadow of a doubt. We all know that pictures can be photoshopped, right?
Yes.
Let me just throw this into the mix. My wife knows Photoshop very well. Okay.
Right.
So never believe any picture I show you. All right. So where are we now on the scale? So clearly not everything is beyond the shadow of a doubt, but probably we need a little bit more than any measure of evidence in order to believe something, right? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say like this. We're gonna say, to know absolutely beyond the shadow of a doubt that something is true. I don't know that that there's anything in life that we know that way. I mean, we don't even know that we really exist beyond the shadow of a doubt. You know what I mean? Like, I could take you down a rabbit hole right now philosophically if you want, and I'll tell you that this whole life is really an illusion. Many philosophers struggle with this, you know that?
Right.
Right? So there's not really that much to be beyond the shadow of a doubt. Not that that's a problem. Not that that's a problem. I just want to clarify that before we move forward in our lesson, like that we're not going to hold Torah up to a standard that we don't hold anything else up to, right? But also, it's ridiculous to say that any measure of evidence, right, that's insufficient. There's no way we would ever say that any measure of evidence is already good enough. All right, somebody said the Torah is true, so I believe Torah is true. My rabbi said it. He looks like a good guy, right? That certainly shouldn't be enough for us. So we're going to try to get somewhere between more likely true than false, and I would hope to beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what I think we're going to get to today, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, which means it's more of a stretch to not believe it than it is to believe it. Okay, because we're going to bring such strong proof. In other words, we can't live, practically speaking, with total skepticism, where you everything falls under this critical eye of like, oh, no, maybe it's not true, right? We all had moments in our lives when you question everything, right? Do I even exist? Is there even a point? Does this whole world exist? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the Earth really round? Is gravity real? Are we really? I don't know. You know, everything can be challenged, right?
Yeah.
But we're not going to go there. What we're going to try to do is we're going to require a certain amount of evidence that's going to make us at least more likely to make us believe that the revelation at Sinai is at least more likely true than false. And I would hope for more. I would hope for if we're going to believe that the Torah came from Sinai, I would hope at least to reach the level of beyond a reasonable doubt, which means you you could start to poke holes in it and say you don't really know because whatever, but it's very flawed to say that it didn't happen. Okay? So now that we have it down pat exactly what it is that we're looking for, what type of evidence we're looking for, beyond a reasonable doubt. So now let's dive into the text, all right? Here's what we're going to do. Everybody have a pen handy?
Yep.
Grab a pen. I'm going to be reading fairly quickly, okay? I'm going to read. This is learning exercise number 3. We're on page 191, and we're going to read all the way through page 196, okay? We're going to go through text 2a, 2b, and 2c, all right? What are these texts? These texts come from Parshat Yitro and Parshat Va'etchanan. These are the 2 times in the Torah that there is a biblical narrative, there's a biblical description of the beginning of the Torah at Sinai, okay? Now remember, we don't believe this. We don't believe this. We're just reading it to understand what the Torah's claim is, okay? So as we go through this, here's what I want you to look out for, okay? I'm going to read it. By the way, you'll notice a little bit of a change in the tenses. The first one is told kind of third person. The second one is told first person. The reason for that is because the first one is the Torah telling us what happened at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. The second one comes from Parashat Vayetchanan, which is in Devarim, which is basically Moses recounting those words to the Jewish people. So he talks more, we saw, we were there, we, like that.
Right.
This is before Moses passes away. I'm going to read these texts. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to look, all right, for any words that you think that points out that this revelation, this godly revelation at Sinai, happened to the masses, happened to all of the Jews, and not just to Moses or one person individually, but rather to a multitude, to many, many people, to all the Jewish people at once. How many details in the verses can you find that say that, all right? Text 2a. Everybody ready? Everybody understand?
Yes.
Okay. Text 2a. In the 3rd month of the children of Israel's departure from Egypt, on this day they arrived in the desert of Sinai. They journeyed from Rephidim, and they arrived in the desert of Sinai, and they encamped in the desert, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. God said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in the thickness of the cloud. All right, so you should be underlining any point that you think shows that this was to all the Jews at the same time. Behold, I will come to you in the thickness of the cloud in order that the people hear when I speak to you, and they will also believe in you forever. God said to Moses, go to the people and prepare them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments. They shall be prepared for the 3rd day, for on the 3rd day God will descend before the eyes of all the people upon Mount Sinai. It came to pass on the 3rd day when it was morning, that there were thunderclaps and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud was upon the mountain, and a very powerful blast of a shofar. And the entire nation that was in the camp shuddered. Moses brought the people out toward God from the camp, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay, and then he continues through all the 10 commandments. Continues the Torah. All the people saw the voices and the torches, the sound of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. The people saw and trembled, and they stood from afar. They said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear, but let God not speak with us, lest we die. The people remained far off, and Moses drew near to the opaque darkness where God was. God said to Moses, so shall you say to the children of Israel, you have seen that from the heavens I have spoken with you. All right, we jump to text 2b. But beware, says Moses, and watch yourself very well, lest you forget the things that your eyes saw, and lest these things depart from your heart. All the days of your life, be sure to make them known to your children and to your children's children. Remember the day that you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, which is Mount Sinai, when God said to me, assemble the people for me, and I will let them hear my words, that they may learn to revere me all the days that they live on the earth, and that they may teach their children. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire up to the midst of the heavens with darkness, a cloud and opaque darkness. Anybody underlined already a couple places?
Yes.
A few places?
Yes.
All right, let's keep going. God spoke to you. You with me in the textbooks?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of text 2b. God spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no image, just a voice. He told you his covenant when he commanded you to do the 10 commandments, and he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets. Did ever a people hear God's voice speaking out of the midst of the fire as you have heard and live? You have shown in order to know that the Lord is God, there is no one else besides him. From the heavens he let you hear his voice to instruct you, and upon the earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. Text 2c, possibly one of the most powerful. Face to face, God spoke with you at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire. God spoke these words to your entire assembly at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the opaque darkness, with a great voice which did not cease. And he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets, and he gave them to me. When you heard the voice in the midst of the darkness, and the mountain was burning with fire, you approached me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. You said, behold, God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We saw this day that God speaks with man, yet man remains alive. So now, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. We will die if we continue to hear the voice of God. For who is there of all flesh who heard the voice of the living God speaking from amidst the fire, as we have and lived? All right. Everybody finish underlining or highlighting? Did I lose some of you along the way? I was reading very quickly, I know. Okay. Malka, how many underlines you got? How many places in this text?
Lots.
How many?
Lots.
How many?
Maybe a
count them
dozen.
up. Everybody count
count them up.
You got a dozen? You got a dozen? Arnold, how many you got? Catherine?
I have 8.
You have 8, okay? There are in total somewhere between 20 and 25 nuances in these words that you can point to, in which you can clearly see that the Torah is making a very, very bold statement. The Torah is not telling us that there was a man who went up to Mount Sinai and brought us down the Torah. The Torah is telling us that all of the Jewish people heard and received and saw the Torah. Okay, look at the screen for a couple of examples. All the people
Right.
saw the voices. The people saw and trembled. I'm sure many of you underlined these words.
I had
The Lord
25.
spoke to
Yeah.
you. You have 25. Oh, wow. See, there you go.
25.
The Lord spoke to you. You heard the sounds of the words. He told you his covenant. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. There's so many. All right?
Right.
Hold on. Face to face, the Lord spoke with you. Your entire assembly. Whoops. When you heard the voice, behold, God has shown us his glory and his greatness. And we heard his voice. God speaks with man. Right? Clearly, there's a large emphasis on a very bold statement that the Torah is making that no other religion lays claim to. We're going to talk a lot about this today, which is that there were many, many Jews that heard and saw and experienced the godly revelation at Sinai. What that revelation was, we don't fully understand, but they saw something and they were 100% convinced that they saw God, that they experienced the godly revelation. All right? Now, how many Jews was it? Anybody?
How many Jews?
Yep. How many Jews were there?
600,000.
No, that was 600,000 men.
All
military.
right. Very
Yeah.
good. Elise, why don't you read for us text 3 on page 196? Let's see how many there were.
Well, there was millions, I guess.
Yeah.
Wait. Text,
At least 30
text 3. Elise, you want to read for us text 3?
3. Okay. 3. Oh, okay. The children of Israel traveled from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 adult males on foot, besides the young children. See,
All right.
I thought I remembered from being there.
You do remember the number 600,000. All right, so if there's 600,000 adult males, Catherine, how many females do you
Okay.
think there are?
Similar. This
Similar.
number.
Okay, we got to go with estimates here. There's no way we're going to know exactly how many Jews there were at the time. But there were probably roughly 4 times as many?
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Because of polygamy?
Yeah.
Ah,
I understand what you're saying, but first of all, it's important to understand that even though polygamy was allowed according to the Torah, it was not very commonly practiced, as we learned actually in a prior class. Much more importantly, where are these women coming from? This is a nation. They're all Jews born from Yaakov Avinu. Presumably, they're having a fairly equal amount of men and women. Even in today's day and age, when I don't know if polygamy is allowed, not allowed, depending which culture you're in, no matter what, the world population today is about 50-50. I understand people say it's 51% women. No problem.
Right.
Whatever it is. But it's about 50-50. Okay, so if we're not going to, by the way, these numbers, really, it's not that important. I do want to give you a general idea, because this is obviously going to be a very rough estimation. If you have 600,000 adult males, there's probably about 600,000 adult females. All right? Now, remember, these are only adults between the ages of 20 and 60. Okay? Because that's who was counted. So now we have the males and the females accounted for. So now we got to try to figure out how many children there are, and by the way, how many seniors there are, right? So let's say a very low estimate, which is 3 per family, which means that there's about 1.5 children and 1.5 seniors per family, which is a very low number.
Okay.
Right? By seniors, by the way, we mean people over 60, so that's not very, very old. It's just people that weren't counted as part of this census. So roughly speaking, let's say that there were 1.8 million children/seniors. Okay? So now we're at 3 million people that are standing at the foot of Sinai. All right? And this is a rough estimate. It may have been many, many more. May have been a little less, but I think, can we agree that we're estimating on the conservative side here? Everybody agree that?
I think that's a minimum for me. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's fairly conservative, this estimation.
Yeah.
So we got 3 million people. 3 million people experience. The Torah is laying claim, and nobody has ever said anything different to that. Nobody has ever come to contradict that. That there were 3 million people who experienced a godly revelation. They saw God. They saw thunder and lightning, and they saw the voices. They heard they heard They heard the lightning and they saw the thunder. Weird things happening. A real godly revelation. 3 million people. 3 million people saw this. All right, no problem. We don't believe the Torah. Okay, we're going to claim that the Torah made it all up. All right. So here's the question: how did the Torah make it up? Okay, how did the Torah get from one day nobody believed that 3 million people saw God to another day 3 million people believed they saw God? All right.
Good.
Remember, these people themselves were convinced. It wasn't that they were trusting one person. It's not 3 million people all say, we heard from Moses that he saw God, or that we all saw God. No. 3 million people are saying, we experienced a godly revelation. Okay?
Right.
So for the next section, all right, which is on page 197 in your textbook, we're going to enter what I like to call the how to start a religion. Okay? We're going to do a how to start a religion for dummies. Okay? Everybody ready? So remember, we're assuming this is not true. The Torah made this up. So our job now is to figure out how did the Torah make this up, okay? How did the Torah get us, because we're saying at some point this was not a true fact. The Torah claimed this fact, and today many people believe this fact. So where along the way was this fact made up, and how did the Torah get these 3 million people, or how did Moses, or whoever you want to claim it is, that convinced these 3 million people? Or by the way, it doesn't need to be those 3 million people themselves. You could convince 20 million people, their ancestor, their great-great-grandchildren, that 3 million people 500 years ago experienced the godly revelation. In my opinion, that's harder to do than to convince these 3 million people. Okay, we're going to go with the lowest number. But let's start with that, okay? So, generally speaking, okay, there are two ways to get people to believe in a lie like this. There are 2 possibilities, 2 ways to do this, all right? We're going to call them the present theory and the past theory, okay? Which means as follows. Let's start with the present theory, okay? The present theory assumes that Moshe, or someone who claims to be Moshe, all right, comes down from a mountain during a storm, a lot of thunder, a lot of lightning, whatever, says to the Jews, remember this is present theory, which means in the present, he's trying to convince them of this. He says, you guys just heard God speak. You just heard him say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Okay? Pretty bold statement for him to make. Yeah. All right? Yeah. And that's the present theory. And somehow, by the end of this, whatever it is, an hour, a day, let's even give him 2 years. Okay? Somehow, by the end of 2 years, after he came down the mountain amidst some thunder and lightning storm, he convinces 3 million people that they did experience a godly revelation. All right? Sounds a little preposterous to me, but we're going to go with it. All right? That's one way that he can make a lie. I don't know. We'll say Moses was extremely, extremely charismatic, or whoever this person is that claims to be Moses was an extremely charismatic person. All right? Perhaps a little bit of an easier way is going to be the past theory. Okay, the past theory means instead of Moses or somebody claiming to be Moses coming down and saying, Malka, you just saw God. Instead, Moses comes down the mountain. Moses comes over to a man named David, and he says, hey, David, do you remember that years ago you were at Sinai with me and we all saw God together? So you're like, I don't remember it, right? And somehow with his charisma, with his whatever it is, he manages to convince you that you actually did experience some sort of godly revelation. Okay? This man named Fred, we'll call him, okay, is walking over to you and he's trying to sell you a lie. Either he's trying to sell you that you actually were there, or that once upon a time you were there at this godly revelation. Okay? Which of these theories do you think has more likelihood of success? Okay, let's rate them on 1 to 5. 1 being very likely to be, 1 indicating very unlikely, very weak argument. It's very unlikely that this man Fred will be able to convince anybody of this, right? And 5 being very likely. All right? Lisa, what do you say between the 2 of them? Where would you put each one of them? Present theory or past theory? Which one of them has a likelihood of success?
Oh.
All right, Elise, what do you say? Which one has more likelihood? Is it easier for me to convince someone?
Success in fooling people or convincing people, probably if you say, remember what happened in the past.
So
Because
past theory.
memories are
Right.
fuzzy.
In other words, you're saying it's a lot harder for me to convince you right now that you just had a revelation at Sinai, but I might be able to convince you that 50 years ago you had a revelation at Sinai.
Yeah.
Right, out of the two of them. Okay, but where would you put them? So present theory, on a scale of 1 to 5, from very unlikely that somebody would be able to convince a mass of people like this.
Very unlikely, unless they've experienced
Present
it.
theory is all the way down at 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where's past theory? All the way at 5? Or somewhere in the middle?
Let's see what the other choices are. Oh, present. Well, I think the past is a lot easier, so it's pretty likely. It's weak.
You think it's all the way at 5?
Most people are convincible, so 3 or 4.
Okay, 3 or 4.
Maybe I'm understanding it wrong, but.
All right. Let's try a little exercise here, right? This is going to be fun. We're going to start with present theory, okay? And then we'll move on to past theory. Let's try a little exercise here.
You're
Malka,
not going to ask all of us what we felt on that?
what was that?
You're not going to ask?
Sure, go ahead. Sometimes I try to just take a sampling. Arnold, go ahead. What do you think? Which one you think?
At present.
You think present theory is more likely?
Yes.
Okay, great. Arnold, you're my victim now. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Arnold, I'd like you to convince Malka right now in front of all of us that you were just in Alaska. That you were just in Alaska.
You know, that I was in Alaska.
5 minutes ago.
5
Please
minutes.
convince her. Go for it.
I won't do that.
Try.
No, there's no way of doing that.
Why not?
Because there's no way I experienced such a thing.
All right, I'm going to try. I think I might be able to give it a shot.
Okay, go ahead.
Malka, in fact, I'll try to convince you, Arnold. Arnold, I was just in Alaska 5 minutes ago. How do you know I wasn't?
We don't have the technology for it.
As it turns out,
He's got a time machine.
I'm actually still in Alaska. No. As it turns out, I'm actually still in Alaska.
Oh, that's true.
We're on Zoom.
That's right. We're on Zoom. That's true.
Turns out you are a little convincible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Virtual
What about if we were giving this class in person? Let's say I was standing up in front. You would say, all of a sudden, it's impossible for me to convince you that I was in Alaska, right?
Correct.
What's if I told you I'm a hypnotist? During the first half of the class, I hypnotized you. I used certain words. You fell asleep. You don't even realize you've been sleeping for 2 days.
Yeah.
And I went to Alaska, and I came back, and I just continued. I brought everybody back.
Yeah.
And I continued giving the class.
Yeah.
I might be able to convince you. No, we're starting to get somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. But let's talk about the shortcomings of this, all right?
Okay.
The problem is that the more I have to convince you about something that just happened, right, the harder it gets, all right? But let's talk now about what present theory actually is, you see, because that's not what present theory is, okay? Here's what present theory is. Arnold, you like the way I just convinced you that I was in Alaska? I said you might even be in Alaska right now, right?
Yeah, you did a good job.
All right.
Okay.
Arnold, so now it's your turn. You're going to convince Malka, not that you were in Alaska, but that she was in Alaska 5 minutes ago. Anybody? Anybody want to venture? Try. Let's see.
Oh, that's tough.
It's a lot harder, huh? Like I said, I could bring you a picture of Alaska. I could show you Alaska. I could say, yeah, you were hypnotized. All sorts of things.
Yeah, you could
like, I don't know. It's you. You know, when push comes to shove, the more proof you bring, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not you. But you're going to try to convince me that I was in Alaska?
You can take pictures from a website. You can order souvenirs.
Exactly. You can do lots of things. Now, look, it's still very difficult because you're talking about present theory. If I was in the room with you,
present,
right? Present theory means that I'm trying to convince you that this happened literally a second ago. Right? I think that would be very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
To do, right? Even about myself. Now, never mind for me to convince you that you were in Alaska. That's extremely difficult. Right?
Totally, yes.
The difference, though, is that we're talking about a whole community of people, millions of people.
And one second, we're getting to that. Right now we're talking about one person, all right? Take it easy, one step at a time. Okay? So now, a charismatic, smooth talker can falsely convince other people, maybe, that he had a vision, right? And by the way, this is actually how many religions started, right? And maybe I should name names, right? But
No.
whether it was Jesus, whether it was Muhammad, whoever it is, many religions started by one person saying, I had a dream.
Right.
I had a vision. I spoke to God. And now I'm going to tell you because I spoke to God. And okay, look, right now, if I tell you that I spoke to God, look, if anybody in this class right now tells me they spoke to God, I just want to, with no offense, because I'm being discriminating against everybody here equally. I have to say, I'm not going to believe you. I don't believe people that spoke to God very easily. You know, they say, you come to the rabbi, you tell the rabbi you've been speaking to God. That's always a good sign. The moment that God is speaking back to you, you have a problem, right? We have a problem on the table. Now,
Yes,
look,
I used to hear that a lot
you used to hear that from Schwartz.
at where I worked.
Oh, where you were? Yeah, exactly. Very good. If you're talking to God, that's a very good sign. If God is talking to you, it's a bad sign. Now, all right. So if you have somebody who's extremely charismatic and comes down and says, I had a vision, and they convince you that something happened to them. It's very, very difficult to do in present theory, because they're convincing you that literally 5 minutes ago, we were both sitting here. He saw God, he heard God, but you didn't, right? That's why very often it's they went behind a rock, they went somewhere, they went up to a mountain, they went into the middle of the desert, whatever it is. But to say that I'm the one who had the vision, right? Somebody comes out behind the rock and says, you know what? Me and you, we both saw God together. I don't understand. You don't believe me? Why don't you believe me? I'm not sure there's anybody charismatic enough that would ever be able to believe them. That would ever be able to get them to believe them, right?
Right.
So again, we're in the middle of our how to start a cult for dummies, right? If you're going to do this, don't try to convince anybody that they saw God. Start off by saying, I saw God and God said you need to listen to me. Now, then you need to have a lot of charisma. You need to have a lot of powers of persuasion. You got to be able to get people to follow you, right?
Yep.
Now, the claim is that at Sinai, that was a public event, experienced by millions, right? And every single one of them was somehow convinced that they themselves saw God. I will even give you that maybe there was a lot of weed in the desert, all right? And they were all high on opium. And many of them saw something that they thought was God. And this was somehow all orchestrated by Fred. And he made up this whole Moses business, and he made up the whole revelation of Sinai. 3 million people, not a single one of them questioned it. He managed to convince 3 million people to not only take hashish, but to believe that they saw God, and every single one of them with the same story. I don't know. There's something a little wrong with this.
Yeah.
So present theory doesn't really work. So let's move on to past theory. What about past theory? Okay, let's try past theory. The first problem when you approach past theory is that it's a collective event. Okay? Elise said she feels that past theory can be very believable because she says, look, people's memories fade. That's just the reality of the world. So I feel like maybe not me, but maybe somebody can come and convince Malka that she once upon a time, 50 years ago, saw God and had a godly revelation. I believe that. I believe that. Malka is brilliant. She's a very smart woman. But if somebody's charismatic enough, and she's Baruch Hashem, not 20 years old. What are you, 21, right, Malka? Right, okay. So she's 21 already. So maybe they can convince her that when she was 5 years old, your memory starts to fade, and they're charismatic enough, and they start to convince her, and they play with her memory a little bit, and maybe they're a hypnotist a little bit, and maybe there are other things. And so slowly Malka begins to believe them. Malka and David, both of them, now I'm like, you're already making too many loopholes. Malka, I already had a hard time believing that Malka, you can convince Malka of something from the past. David too? All right, okay, let's say both of them. And Catherine, and Lisa, and Elise, and Arnold, every single one of them, all of them at the same time, you're going to convince them all. All right, fine. All right, I'll even say one at a time. You approach them one at a time, convinced every single one of them at a time. But now he convinced them that they were all in the same place at the same time. And they all saw, not just that they drank a can of seltzer. That I think is much, much easier to convince Malka. She hasn't been keeping track of all the cans of seltzer that she drank throughout her life, right? But you could have convinced them all of an event that the Torah is describing as miraculous, as as super rational, right? Super rational. Let's see this in the text. Then we'll continue to dissect just exactly how preposterous it would be that somebody would believe past theory with regards to the revelation at Mount Sinai. David, you want to read for us? Text 4. We're on page 197.
Yes. Imagine someone making up the story and trying to sell it. He is going to come to a group of people and he is going to tell them that sometime in their past, their ancestors stood at a mountain and heard God speak. He is not talking about people in China or Tibet. He is talking about the ancestors of his audience. He is claiming that God revealed himself to all of their ancestors simultaneously, and by doing so, founded a new religion. What is the question with which the audience will confront him? The obvious question is, if this happened to our ancestors, how is it that no one knows about it but you? What happened to the memory of that event? Everybody simply forgot it. They were more interested in the soccer scores. No one told us about it. The whole religion just disappeared. It is simply not credible to tell an entire nation that their collective ancestors witnessed such an earth-shattering event and that it was forgotten. It would be impossible to explain why the memory of that event disappeared. The person inventing the story and trying to sell it will never succeed.
Thank you, David. So imagine Fred comes to us. And he says, look, I'm going to start small. I'm going to start with you 7, right? The 7 of you on this call. I'm just going to try to convince the 7 of you that your ancestors, 3 million of them, all saw some sort of godly revelation at the same time. So now he's already got one major benefit. He's not convincing you that you were in Alaska, right? He's not convincing you that you saw it. Fred is just trying to convince us that something happened a long time ago. Immediately, our first questions to him are going to be, and by the way, this would happen even if it was only one of us. We'd say, really? Such a thing happened? How come I never saw that in any history books? That's a little weird. I never heard this from anybody. Now he has to convince hundreds and thousands of people of this. That this major cosmic event took place with 3 million people, and that somehow everybody forgot it but Fred. And Fred is the single savior who's going to come, and he's going to tell us, yeah, it's amazing that I remembered it, because if I wouldn't have remembered it, nobody would have remembered it. Right? To say such a thing starts to become less and less believable, right? In other words, there's a psychological rule about how people, nations, communities, whatever it is, begin to believe something. If the claim is something that the listener would have expected to have been aware of previously, that's when we start to get skeptical, right? For me to tell you that 3 million people all coughed at the same time, they were in different parts of the world, but they all coughed at the same time, right? I might be able to convince one of you of that. It's not something that anybody expected to have known at any point prior, right? I didn't go against that psychological rule. I didn't try to convince you of something that you expect to have been aware of. But now I tell you, no, that's not what happened. The entire stock market, there was a coronavirus, and the entire world went into lockdown, and the stock market crashed, and all that happened in 1919. Not in 2020, in 1919. You'd be like, really? Something makes me think that's not true. I would have heard about that. The whole world going into lockdown and everybody, the stock market crashing, all that happened in 2020. That didn't happen in 1919. I feel like I would have heard about that. Right?
Right.
So the moment that Fred is trying to sell something to us that we feel like we would have, right? So that's number one. Okay. No, immediately they're going to ask, what happened? And you're going to have to make up another detail that all 3 million of those people maybe died immediately after the revelation, which by the way is the claim of one of the religions. I think Hinduism says that, and because that's the only way you can get people to believe it. You got to say there was a godly revelation to many, many people, and then they all died. So now I'm the only one who can tell you about it. I'm the only one who survived. Or I'm the only one I know about it from some godly vision. Right? That's the only thing Fred could do to make you believe it. Everybody with me here?
Yep.
Okay. But there's another major flaw with past theory. You know what the major flaw with past theory is? Even if he tells you and he convinces you of something that you would have expected to know. And he tells you, I know you would have known it, but here's the reason why you never would have known it. Okay? And he tacky convinces you, right? Here's the $1 million question. Name 4 major Jewish figures. Give me 4 major Jewish figures, people. Famous people.
That what? Just names?
Moshe?
Any names? Moshe. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu. That's number 1. Number 2.
Aaron.
Come on, guys. Doesn't have to be any famous Jewish leaders.
Joshua.
Joshua. Okay. Number 3.
David.
David. Another one.
Solomon.
Solomon. All right. Hillel. Shammai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Akiva. Right. The Rebbe. Right. Who's missing? Fred.
Abraham.
Fred. Where is the one Jewish person that you're telling me that at one point told us that 2 million people experienced the revelation at Sinai? There's not a single person you can ever point to about that. There's not a single person in Jewish history. The Jewish story doesn't go that way. The Jewish story goes, 3 million people experienced the revelation, and they passed it down to their children since then, all the way down to us. Right. There is nowhere in Jewish history recounted, and that's not you can hide. You can't hide that.
Yeah.
We are laying claim in the Torah that 3 million people experienced it. Not only did they themselves experience it, but they passed it down to their children, every single one of them. Not that one person, some sort of Fred, he's missing. He's God. There is no Fred. Right? You see what I'm saying? Elise, read to us, please, text number 5, page 198.
Okay. Enough with Fred, right? Okay. Oh, no, back to Fred. Okay. A major problem with this theory is we've never heard of Fred or his heroic resurrection of Judaism. Certainly, one of the most significant events of Jewish history would have been the tumble, when world Jewry forgot that they were the 3 million prophets, and the recovery when Fred reminded the Jews about the national prophecy at Mount Sinai. Yet, in an otherwise comprehensive Jewish history, we find no mention of such a claim. Jewish texts describe various historical crises and the heroes who assisted during these difficult times. We know that Moses brought the Torah down from Mount Sinai. Joshua first brought the Jews into the land of Israel. David slew Goliath. Solomon built the temple, and Ezra brought the Jews back to the land of Israel after the Babylonian exile. We know that Rabbi Judah the Prince compiled the Mishnah, and that Ravina and Rav Ashi compiled the Talmud. We know about Maimonides, and hundreds of other stars of medieval Jewry, and what their respective contributions were. We possess detailed records about every great Jewish personality except for one. We don't have any mention of the man who reminded Jewry that they were the only people in human history ever to experience national prophecy. And we don't have any record of the amnesia Fred rescued them from. Until 200 years ago, every Jew, member of a Jewish figure, like Christians, Sadducees, or Karaites, affirmed that ancient Jewry, their direct ancestors, had experienced national prophecy at Mount Sinai. Not a single ancient or contemporary individual or religious community has any tradition about the man who should have been the second greatest hero of Jewish history. Fred. Why?
Right? Now, okay, I know a lot of you are thinking, all right, you keep saying Fred. Obviously, there's no Fred. Maybe one of the great Jewish leaders in Jewish history was somebody who did that. Maybe King David did that. Maybe Ezra did that. But maybe Ravina and Ravashi did that. Let me ask you a question. If there had been a time when there were 3 million prophets, okay, 3 million people who had experienced a Sinaitic revelation, and that had been forgotten, and there was one man who brought this tradition back to us, I have a feeling that would be the overarching legacy of this man's history. There is no such record anywhere. It's as if such a thing happened, there's nowhere in our Jewish history books, or in any history books for that matter, that lay claim to such a person existing. Certainly Ezra brought the Jewish people back. He definitely did certain things for the Jewish people. King David did certain things for the Jewish people. Not a single one of them has it ever recounted that they were afraid, that they were somebody who brought Judaism back when it was completely forgotten brought the tradition of Sinai back when it was completely forgotten from 3 million people or more. Of course, this would be many generations later. And that's one of the major issues with past theory. Okay, we need to take a short break. So Menachem could say good night to everybody.
No.
Good night, Menachem.
Say good night, Malka.
Um,
Say good night, David.
so sweet.
Okay.
Say good night, Catherine.
Good night. Good night. Have a nice
Good
dream.
night, Arnold.
Good night.
Say good night, Lisa.
Welcome.
Say good night, Elise.
Good night.
Now say good night, everybody.
Mm.
Oh, mommy.
Okay. There we
Hey.
go. Okay. So there is so present theory, past theory. This is not. It's not believable to say that such a thing was ever made up at any point in Jewish history. Okay. So there is one more way to do it. It has its own issues. It's called the snowball theory. I'll introduce it briefly, and then we'll talk about why that doesn't work. And that is that it kind of happens slowly. Let's say Moses came down from Mount Sinai and he only claimed a personal revelation at Sinai. Okay? And then what happened is that over the years, the story, right now, one second, obviously Moses got everybody to believe him based on his charisma, based on his powers of persuasion, whatever it is. He got all the Jewish people to believe that he saw a vision at Sinai and that God spoke to him. All right. Now, it's not a claim of mass revelation, right? So in such a scenario, you would say one person, a few people, they saw God, they're coming and they're telling us they saw God. And then somewhere along the line, it snowballed. Okay, over thousands of years, the lie, which was Moses heard God at Sinai, became maybe only the Kohanim, let's say, saw God at Sinai. And then it snowballed, and it became, all the Jews, only the men, let's say, saw him. And then it becomes, all the Jews saw him. And over time, it kind of grew until it snowballed into this religion that we have today. I could see a firm atheist saying that, right? Saying, you're right, it's very difficult for me to convince people that, but over time, lies grow and grow and grow, and maybe not at every generation was this fully believed, but today we're going to do nothing else, so we believe, so these people are believing it. These Jews are believing it. The Torah says it, so it seems true, and that Torah maybe was written only 1,000 years ago, not 3,500 years ago like it claims, or like it really claims that it was written before the creation of the world. And it was written after already a lot of people believed it, and they just have to kind of cement the whole story, right? So there was a personal vision, and that grew into mass revelation, all right? So text 6a is going to help us understand this a little bit more. Arnold, you want to read for us?
No,
Page 200.
I don't have the book.
What was that?
Remember, I don't have the book.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa, you want to read for us? Text 6a. You're muted, Lisa.
I just noticed that.
Go ahead.
The beginnings of all ancient and modern religions have a common thread. One or two people have a revelation and persuade others to follow. Thus, for example, Buddhist writings tell us that Prince Siddhartha Gautama launched
I don't
Buddhism
know these names either.
after his solitary, bit of a tongue twister. After his solitary ascendance through the 8 stages of transic insight, Islamic texts tell us that Muhammad founded Islam following the first of many personal prophetic experiences. Christian writings reveal that Paul first met Jesus, converted to Christianity, and spread the faith more than 3 decades after Jesus' death. Joseph Smith Jr. and his partner Oliver Cowdery launched the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, after the 2 men were visited by angels and long-dead disciples of Jesus. And Sun Myung Moon launched the Unification Church after privately receiving direct orders to do so from Jesus himself. The beginnings of Children of God, Christian Science, Ekankar, Elan Vital, I Am, the philosophy, the theosophy, in fact, the beginnings of all world religions, are equally unverifiable. Never does a large, clearly identifiable group of people experience prophecy and live to tell others about it. Moreover, in a handful of cases where in large groups of people supposedly witness miracles, rarely are these witnesses named or identified in any way that would allow for verification, and in the very exceptional cases involving clearly identified groups of witnesses, never more than one or two of the religion's current adherents claim to have met or descended directly from the named witnesses. In all these cases, the religion's credibility rests on the credibility of its one or two founders. While it is certainly possible that the beginnings claimed by any of the thousands of sects and cults included in the world's more than 300 major religious traditions could be true, it is easy to imagine how charismatic charlatans could have launched any of these movements. The one known exception to this rule is Judaism.
Thank you, Lisa. Just to clarify, there is one other exception, which is Hinduism, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, but there's a very, very big difference. Catherine, you want to read that for us? Text 6b.
Some Indian groups once possessed an oral tradition that the Hindu god Krishna addressed the millions of warriors who participated in the battle described in the
Bhagavad Gita. Apparently, it's a basic Hindu text.
a basic Hindu text. This is not a challenge to our observations. However, since the same oral tradition also reports that all those who heard Krishna speak died in a battle, no witnesses survived to testify to the experience. And the story of this mass prophecy is only known because God revealed to an unnamed individual later in history.
Right, so Hinduism also lays claim to the fact that there might have been mass revelation to millions of people, in fact, during this battle of whatever it is, right? But here's the key fact. Conveniently, all those people died.
Yeah.
And how do we know this story? Only through one prophet,
Right.
right? An untold individual later on, whatever, right? Who came and told us this. So that doesn't help. That doesn't come close to Judaism right now. All this is fine and dandy, and it definitely makes the Judaism claim be much higher up on the ladder, that it's much more believable, and there's much more of a tendency to believe that one than to believe any other religion. But it still didn't completely denounce the snowball theory. Why couldn't this have grown over time?
Yep.
Right? Why couldn't this have happened slowly over time? In other words, one day there was, somebody somebody, this Fred or this Moses, whoever it is, convinces a whole bunch of people that he heard from God. Then slowly over time it grows into a whole thing, right? So the answer is very, very simple. Let me ask you a question. If I were to come to you right now with a chunk of gold in my hand, right? And I would say, you know this chunk of gold that I'm holding in my hand? It used to be cow manure. And I miraculously turned it from cow manure into a chunk of gold. All right? You take the chunk of gold home and you examine it under a microscope and everything. It turns out it's really a chunk of gold. What's the first question you ask me?
How did it happen?
What was that?
How did you do it?
I say I'm a miracle worker. What's the first question you ask me?
I say, can you do it again?
Very good. Thank you. Every single magician struggles with this in every single magic show, right? Do it again. That's what we do. That's the way it works. Everything natural, right? In other words, like this. It's a rule of physics in general that anything that can occur in a natural way has to happen more than once, right? That's a rule of physics. If it happened once, why did it only... If it only happened once and never happened again in history, thousands of years are going by, it only happened once, it's never happened again, you have to have an explanation for that. And if you don't have an explanation for that, then it's not really natural. Something weird is happening here. That's where the line history repeats itself comes from, right? And that's the point we're getting to here. That's what's so important. Who's reading now? We're back at the top. Malta, you want to read for us text 7? Oh, sorry, Malta's walking. David, go ahead, go for us. Text 7. Very powerful about why snowball theory really cannot be true.
A basic assumption of scientific method is that the results are replicable. If something happens naturally once, we expect that it will happen more than once. Although history is not science, everyone knows that history repeats itself, not in every last detail, but at least in general. Thousands of religions have existed in the world. Nobody has documented a single one that has the same claim as Judaism. If the story evolved naturally or was perpetrated as a hoax, why has it not happened more than once? And since it hasn't, it is irrational to believe in Sinai. Who is relying on blind faith? The one who believes in the story as written, or the one that claims without any historical support that it was a result of natural processes, but only happened one time to one group in all of recorded history? And this simple objection will apply to any natural explanation that anyone will ever propose to discredit the authenticity of the Sinai revelation. If it is natural, then why did it happen only once in recorded history?
Vero Bell mentions a very, very strong point. Okay, here's what he says. He says, look, I get it. You're going to tell me some sort of natural evolution that one guy started a religion, same way that all other religions started. One person had a vision, he came down, convinced a whole bunch of other people because he's charismatic. All right, no problem. I believe it. Now you're going to tell me I should believe that story somehow over time evolved, not into being that he had 3 million followers, but into being that 3 million people actually experienced that revelation, that sign. Okay, let's even say I believe you. Here's my question to you. How come it never happened again? I'm not going to ask you to do it again. I understand. You're telling me it's a natural process, and it just happens. There have been thousands of religions over many, many, many years. Christianity is not a young religion anymore. Neither is Islam, by the way, right? That's the point we're making by pointing out the glaring and stark difference between Judaism and these other religions. The point is not to put down these other religions. The point is not to say that Judaism's claim is a better claim. The point is to show you that even though there's every single incentive in the world for such a natural progression to happen, that somebody should claim that 3 million people had some sort of godly revelation, because that would make your religion the best one in the world, and that would make your religion the most likely to be believed, right? Yet there's not a single other religion that even lays claim to 10 people experiencing a godly revelation at the same time. 50 people experiencing a godly revelation at the same time. 3 million people. If this is a natural process and it kind of snowballed over time, how come it didn't happen to any other religion? And that's a very, very powerful point. And that's what tips us over the edge. In other words, remember, we still don't know 100% certain that what happened at Sinai happened. And that's where belief is going to play a role. But we should have at least brought you to a point where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's much more ludicrous for me to believe that the whole thing somehow was made up and somehow over time evolved in this manner. There's too many flaws with that logic. It makes much more sense to believe that it actually happened. It's much more plausible to believe that the story as the Torah wrote it actually happened. Because otherwise, where did the story get made up? Present theory certainly didn't work. Past theory we explained is very unlikely. Snowball theory we just explained to you. You're telling me nobody ever did this. It kind of happened naturally. It was an evolution over time. So how come it never happened even on a smaller scale or on a different scale with any other religion? Why is Judaism to date still the only religion that ever points this out? And let's conclude with this extremely powerful, one second. And the uniqueness of the Jewish claim makes a person pause, before you just throw it into the mix with everybody else. And it's fascinating to see that even Moshe Rabbeinu himself points this out to the Jewish people in text 8. Elise, you want to read for us?
9 or 8? 8.
Text 8.
Okay. For ask now regarding the early days that were before you, since the day that God created man upon the earth. and from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, whether there was anything like this great thing, or was the likes of it heard? Did a people ever hear God's voice speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and live?
Thank you, Elise. This is a powerful point. Let's remember, Moses is speaking here. This is literally from the end of the Torah, Deuteronomy, right? Moses is speaking to the Jewish people right before he passes away. So how many years after Sinai is this?
I'm going to say 40.
40 years in the desert. Moses is passing away right before they enter the land of Israel. 40 years later, okay? What happens over 40 years? All those kids that we spoke about, we don't know how many of them there were, but however many children there were 5 and 10 years old, they all grew up now, all right? Now, they have had children.
Correct.
And even their parents have had other children. In other words, there's multiple generations of people, right? And by the way, most of the generation that did see Sinai is already dead. They all passed away, remember? During the 40 years in the desert. So we're left with a whole new generation. Moses is looking at them, and he realizes that some of them might start to question if this story ever actually happened. Maybe Moses made it up. So Moses points out to them what we've been pointing out over the whole past hour, which is, he says, go around, do your research. The world has been around for 2,500 years. Find me one other religion that's laying claim to this. There were many other religions before Judaism. Not a single one of them ever laid claim to the fact that a whole nation together, he says, you heard from your parents that they saw this at Sinai. How did I convince them of that? He says, tell me how did I do it? I'd love to do it again. I'd be a millionaire if I could, right? Because every cult and religion ends up, somehow you make money at the end of the day, right? There is no way to make that up. That's what Moshe is pointing out to them. He's pointing it out to them 40 years later. I'm pointing it out to you 3,000 years later. So if, and like I said, we're never going to get to beyond any shadow of a doubt. Like I said, even David, he's in construction and sitting in his house, and 6 years ago he says he saw the beams. Even he can't be 100% sure that his house is not going to come crumbling down.
Right.
It might not be an earthquake, etc. And yet he's not wearing a hard hat. Why? Because we don't live our lives as skeptics. What we're trying to get to is where it's preposterous to think the other way. It's logical enough for me that I know it to be true in the fact that anything else seems ridiculous. That's where hopefully we've gotten to at this point. Or at the very least, it's more likely to be true than to be false. And the Rebbe points out, and this is the letter that we'll conclude with, in a letter of the Rebbe, Malka, if you can please read for us on page 204, text 9, the Rebbe points out what the implications of understanding Judaism with not just a belief, but with actually this rationale, how much that affects us. Malka, don't forget to unmute yourself. Whenever you're ready, text 9. Hold on. Are you good? No, not working. All right. So, Lisa, I think. Text 9, page 204.
Text 9.
Text 9.
The divine revelation at Mount Sinai was a fact witnessed by millions of people, all of whom reported it to the minutest detail accurately, for the whole people of Israel stood at Mount Sinai and witnessed it. We know that this is a fact because millions of Jews in our day accepted it as such, because they received it as such from their own parents, and these millions in turn received the evidence from the previous generation, and so on, in an uninterrupted chain of transmitted evidence from the millions to millions of witnesses, generation after generation, back to the original millions of witnesses who saw the event with their own eyes. Among these witnesses were many who initiated the sciences in those days, many achievements of which are still baffling nowadays. Among them were philosophers and thinkers, as well as ignorant and uneducated persons, women, and children of all ages. Yet all of them reported the event and phenomena connected with it without contradiction to one another. Such a fact is certainly indisputable. I do not believe that there is another fact which can match it for evidence and accuracy. To deny such a fact is anything but scientific. It is the very opposite of science. Parenthetically, it is unfortunate that this basic difference between the Jewish religion and those of others is so little known, for the Jewish religion is the only one that is not based on a single founder or a few, but is based on the divine revelation witnessed by all the people, numbering several millions. This answer also,
So the ... is someone's name.
okay, their statement that the acceptance of the Torah as being the only truth is dangerous since its authors were only men, and as men they could not have been infallible. Jews accept the Torah precisely because it was given by God, not man, and it was given in the presence of millions of people who had seen it and heard it with their own eyes and ears. That is why the Torah is the absolute truth, for God is absolute.
This letter to me is so super powerful. It's not just that Judaism needs some, it's not that Judaism needs some kind of, logical explanation or proof in my head. But to know that is to infuse my life with truth. One of the things that the Rebbe is addressing here is that someone had challenged whoever the person that's writing the letter to the Rebbe is. Someone had challenged him and said the acceptance of the Torah as being the only truth is dangerous. Right? Why? Because its authors were men. You believe that the Torah comes from people, and it's dangerous to believe that because they could have made up anything. So if you believe that's the only truth and that's how you live your life, you're willing to die for the Torah. Remember, that's how this whole conversation started. You're willing to die for the Torah? That's a little bit preposterous. So the Rebbe points out that based on all of the proof that we discussed today, we arrive not just at the Torah being true, but at the Torah being godly. And that this being the only book, the only scroll, the only text that we know of in this world that comes from God. And it's the best logical proof you're ever going to get about anything coming from anywhere, never mind from God. It says that that's why Judaism was set up that way by Hashem. If that's the case, then the next time you look at the Torah, you use a whole different perspective. This is not just any book that's going to give me meaning in my life, that's going to give me beauty in life. When we see meaning, we experience truth. Why? Because we're looking at this and we say, this is the word of Hashem. Right? Because we look at this and we say, this is the only book that we have in this world that comes directly from God. It's the only book that's completely true. Of course I follow it. Of course that's what I'm going to believe above all else. And of course, yes, I will be willing to give my life up for it. And with this we conclude lesson 6 of Judaism Decoded. And we also conclude the entire course, Judaism Decoded. And I hope that for you, this has been as meaningful as it has been for me. In other words, that now, not that any of this was needed. None of this was needed. We all believe the Torah Shebechtav, the Torah Shebal Peh, we believe the written Torah, we believe the oral Torah. We have a belief, we have a neshama, we have, we go about Yiddishkeit, and maybe we also look for meaning and we get meaning in Judaism, etc. But when the more you learn about it, you understand what Torah is, right? Like if I had to recommend, I would recommend that people, and anybody who ever is going to learn Torah should learn this course first. And perhaps that's why so much of this course was based on the Rambam's introduction to Mishnayot. Before you start to study Torah, you should really understand what it is. And I hope that if you gained anything over the course of these 6 weeks, of these 6 lessons, you've really gained an appreciation as to the fact that Torah is truth. It's a brilliant way that it's set up. And all of a sudden, all of the one-line questions that people throw at you would start thinking, oh, maybe the Torah is not true. Maybe the rabbis made it up. Maybe it's only people that wrote the Torah. Hopefully you have a much deeper appreciation for what the Torah is. And now, I congratulate you on finishing this course, because definitely it was not an easy journey, and there was a lot of depth to it. There was a lot of deep parts to it, philosophical parts to it, etc. But I just congratulating you. Now I give you a task. Now I give you a challenge. Now that you know what the Torah is, now that you appreciate the truth of the Torah, right? You have to go and study it. Now you have to go and study the Torah and allow it to change you, allow it to come into your life, allow it to give you meaning in your life. And that journey is the rest of your life. It's not 6 weeks. So thank you all for joining us, and I congratulate you on concluding this course of Judaism Decoded.
Thank you,
so
Rabbi.
much.
Thank you.